Well, to look at the political implications of today's ruling, we're now joined by Matthew Lebo. He is the chair of the Political Science Department at Western University, specializes in U.S. politics. Matthew, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us so quickly this evening.
Hi.
Listen, going into this trial, Donald Trump enjoyed the support of a majority of Republican voters. Does that change now that he is a convicted felon?
Well, probably not. He has secured a lot of votes in the primaries. He's still getting significant opposition. There's still people going out in Republican primaries and voting for Nikki Haley, even though she dropped out. But that question is really a key, that he has continued to have a majority of Republican voters on his side. There's lots of prominent Republicans, especially today, who would wish that they had an alternative. But for any number of Republicans to try and push him out at this point, they're just risking their own careers. So even with this verdict looming, you saw the other day Nikki Haley endorsed Donald Trump, and now she'll support him. And so this has just been the problem since about 2015, is that Republicans, as Donald Trump gets more and more popular, a Republican can't stick their neck out, say that they would rather have somebody else without really putting their own career in jeopardy. And so, yeah, probably today he still has the Republican majority. He still has a lock on the nomination of the Republican Party. And he looks like, it will go through to the convention and onto the general election.
Okay, so Republicans may not be able to stick their neck out, or at least may be afraid to stick their neck out and criticize Donald Trump even with his conviction. But how bad is it for election hosts? Because at the end of the day, even if he officially becomes the nominee, right now the presumptive nominee, how does this affect a general election for Donald Trump?
Well, everything matters in an election that's going to be so close. So in the 2020 election, Joe Biden got 7 million more votes than Donald Trump, but it was a razor-thin victory in the Electoral College. And we're still looking at 6 key states. The election will be decided in those 6 states. They were all so close last time that moving a few thousand votes, a few 100,000 votes, is just huge. And so there's a huge chunk of Republican voters that will vote for Donald Trump no matter what, that have said that. And then there's some voters that he needs to bring in addition to that, to get over, to get the majority of votes in states like Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania. And today hurts. The Wikipedia page has already been changed to Donald Trump convicted felon. This will be a message that's brought out over and over again. And if it costs him, even 1% of the vote, that can be the election.
So how does that then, okay, it could cost him the vote there. How does that help then Joe Biden? Because, as much as this looks bad on Donald Trump, Joe Biden still has a fair number of critics, in particular people questioning his age and his ability to do the job.
Yeah, so for Joe Biden, this is a much better conversation to be having than his age or his fitness or his stance on Israeli actions in Gaza. So, Joe Biden's hurting in a lot of places. He's hurting with younger voters. He's hurting with people talking a lot about the cost of living. And this is a good thing for him to be talking about, or for the news to be talking about. So one thing that's come out in a lot of polls is when they ask people, about Donald Trump's presidency, it's almost 4 years ago, and the memories aren't so good. People, have better memories of Donald Trump than when he was in office. A lot of people remember, some economic stability, which wasn't really the case, certainly in 2020 and the pandemic. And so this trial and the convictions will remind people of sort of the mayhem of a Trump presidency. And that's, all to the advantage of Biden for people to remember just, all the various aspects of Donald Trump, besides that he's not Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because as you and I are having this conversation, I think it's worthwhile pointing out that even though Donald Trump is convicted now and a convicted felon, this does not actually hinder his ambition for re-election, at least not constitutionally in the United States. Talk to us about that.
Well, definitely nothing hinders his personal ambition, right? He wants to win again. He wants to run again. He's already started with the narrative that the election will be rigged, and whether he wins or loses, he will claim that he won. So even as a convicted felon, yes, he can run, and he'll certainly use the conviction to try and raise money to talk about how he's the target. And if you turn on some news channels, they're already talking about this is lawfare, that this is all evidence of Biden's overreaching, that they've gone after him legally. So there's really, there's not a legal way to stop him from running for president. What could stop him but won't would be the Republican Party saying enough is enough and doing something to get a new nominee.
Mm-hmm. And we just heard that from Joe Biden's statement, saying that ultimately it will be up to Americans, even with this conviction, to reject Donald Trump come Election Day. Although, is there a question about whether or not Donald Trump can actually vote? Because this is an interesting scenario. He is a convicted felon, but now a resident of Florida because he left New York. So my understanding is in Florida, a convicted felon or a criminal conviction disqualifies someone from voting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. It's possible that he could change his residency, but unlikely. But yeah, convicted felons can't vote in Florida. And that's a really interesting part of Florida politics, right? So Al Gore lost Florida by 527 votes. Had felons been allowed to vote in 2000, he would have been president. So it's kind of interesting to see this now hitting Republicans in a different way. Florida won't be that close. He can win Florida without his own vote. But it's possible that it's just another thing that looks bad, that brings to mind the chaos of another Trump presidency.
Yeah, and as we said right off top, another presidential first here, the first time a U.S. president is a convicted felon. Listen, Matthew Lebo, of course, sentencing, we should tell people at home, will take place July the 11th. We'll be watching that very closely. Until then, thank you, and without a doubt, we'll be speaking again.
Okay, thank you.